Good day, folks, and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. We go from one Mike Oldfield album to another Mike Oldfield album. Exactly 10 years later, in fact. After the supporting tour for 5 Miles Out in 1982, which I reviewed last year, Mike went into working on his next record, having already started to expand beyond the multi-side compositions of Tubular Bells, Hergest Ridge, Omadorn, and Incantations. He continues the formula that he set up with albums like Platinum and, 5 Miles Out, having the first side be one long track, while the second side have multiple shorter songs in it. Similar to something like Pink Floyd's Atom Heart Mother or Rush's 2112. This may as well be something of a fine compromise that would please a lot of people. And it would seem so, since the previous albums have already had some wild success of their own. This one, however, is possibly Oldfield's most successful album in the 1980s alone, peaking number 6 in the UK and even number 1 in countries such as Germany, Norway, and Sweden. This is all likely due to a particular song or single that we'll be getting into eventually, but for now, let's jump into Mike Oldfield's 1983 album, Crises. The cover is somewhat stylized and very minimalistic, featuring a skyscraper or like a tower of some sorts in the middle of a vast ocean with a full moon right above it. And in the very bottom left corner is a single lonely man, pondering and waiting. Mike had mentioned in an interview that the tower represents his music, while the man in the corner represents himself. There's quite a bit to interpret with that, which I'll get into very soon. Though I gotta say, that moon does look mighty big. I'm expected to have the angry moon face from Majora's Mask. I don't know, it's probably the decent vibe I'm getting. But anyways, decent artwork for an album I'm sure is no doubt will be decent. We begin the album with its 20-minute title track, Crises, which takes up the entirety of side 1. Starting off rather quiet yet uncertain with some synthesizers, similar in melody to the opening of Tubular Bells. And like that track, this too consists of several sections dedicated to certain instruments, different guitars and keyboards and all that. Once again, he does most of the instruments here. However, though, there are more additional musicians on board here than on Tubular Bells, similar to 5 Miles Out, of course. The drums and percussion in this track, if not the whole album, are done by Toto member Simon Phillips, who also co-produced this album with Mike. Then on the 3-minute and 50-second mark, we get into a kind of new wave bit because, hey, 80s, with a surprising mix of pop and prog music. And soon enough, Mike himself sings about the crises, how you can't get away, and how he needs you on his side because there's a crisis. I guess he predicted the many crisis events in the DC universe that would come over the many years and decades to come. This was also back when Mike was already starting to get a bit more comfortable in actually singing in his own music, or just singing in general at all, really. Mind you, he still lends out singing roles to other people as well, so it seems like a good balance. 7 minutes and 50 seconds in, the melody suddenly changes once more into something slightly calmer and yet just as mysterious, as Mike repeats the line, "The Watcher and the Tower, waiting hour by hour." Much like the cover artwork itself. Waiting for what exactly? Who knows? He's probably waiting for a bridge to form so that he can reach the tower, or waiting for some kind of low tide so that the ocean would not take up the whole flooded area. Or he's probably waiting for the next Half-Life or Kingdom Hearts game. I don't know. Jokes aside, though, this could represent how Oldfield observes his own music, waiting and watching how it may take on a life of its very own. At least, that's how I am interpreting it, as simple as possible. There could be more to it, though. Then at the halfway point, the few amount of lyrics end there as the music changes once more, becoming nothing but pure, serene synthesizers. And at last, it all culminates when the keyboards, guitars, and drums all come together into a wonderful climax before things eventually settle down into a close. Apparently, in an interview with Piccadilly Radio, Mike himself had considered this one to be one of his best tracks, his best bits of music since Tubular Bells. And I can agree with him. In some way, this does feel like a 4 to 5 minute long pop rock track that got extended out 4 or 5 times its length. That's a good way, of course, nothing bad about that. The more the merrier. Side 2 begins with Moonlight Shadow. When it isn't Tubular Bells, that's Mike Oldfield's most well-known song, it's this one right here. A simple, soft rock pop tune with guest vocals by Maggie Reilly, or Riley, I don't know, who had already done some similar collabs in both QE2 and 5 Miles Out. However, it doesn't dilute or depart immensely from Mike's prog rock roots. If anything, it kind of complements it, showing that he can do any and all sorts of genres, styles, and conventions. And I think that's part of the reason why he had been endeared by so many people for so long and for so many years, with this and Tubular Bells, of course, being the most renowned of that. Anyway, in this, Maggie sings about seeing someone for the last time as they're carried away by a moonlight shadow, passing on word and warning. Lost in a riddle that Saturday night, far away on the other side, and caught in the middle of a desperate fight. This implies that this male love interest she sings about was gunned down and killed, likely in a shooting or an assassination. Some might have even theorized that this was based on and influenced by the then recent murder of John Lennon, although Mike himself had said that this wasn't exactly the case here, that he was actually inspired by the 1953 film Houdini, starring Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh. Later lyrics definitely lean into this idea of a gunned-down lover. The trees that whisper in the evening sing a song of sorrow and grieving. All she saw was the silhouette of a gun, and he was shot 6 times by a man on the run. Although part of me is sure that those trees were actually whispering how hot-looking Mike is. Hey, he must have looked pretty youthful in his day. Speaking of Mike, though, we soon get another excellent and very familiar sounding guitar solo. Another bit worth of noting is when Maggie sings, "I stay, I pray, see you in heaven far away one day," as if she's hoping to see her lover again someday in the afterlife, and she has enough patience to wait until it's her time. While the song had reached number 4 here in the UK, it managed to make it to number 1 in countries such as Austria, Belgium, Ireland, makes sense since Mike is of Irish descent, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland. Oh yeah, I know, wow. Those countries got good taste in music, I gotta say. Anyways, Moonlight Shadow is simple and a pretty unique song with an emotional mood and lyrics about mourning for one's love. Or it could be about Kyrie lamenting over Sora's passing after Kingdom Hearts 3. Speaking of, I'm still curious about that war that Big Jack Films was going about. Is it possible that Sora and Kyrie participated in that? I know, it's probably been done by now. Next is In High Places. While Moonlight Shadow remains one of his more iconic tracks, this one is probably more underrated in my opinion, featuring the vocals of John Anderson of Yes fame. And considering the musical direction that band were going through at the time, if I didn't know any better, I could have easily misconstrued this for an actual Yes song of that era. But none of it is technically a bad thing though. I do enjoy both Yes and Mike Oldfield, as I've probably demonstrated in my reviews for certain albums by both. So, hearing John sing for a song by the latter is quite interesting. It also features a pretty nice vibraphone here, and they're being played by Pierre Moylin. I keep apologizing for people and my butchering of their names. That's going to be a pattern, isn't it? But anyways, Pierre is another frequent collaborator with Oldfield. And here, John sings about looking down from in high places, lifting off the ground without a sound, and moving through open spaces. So far, the songs here seem to connect to the album artwork, at least in lyrics. The Watcher in the Tower, the full moonlight casting a shadow, and looking down from a very high place. It could just be me reading to it deeply, but it sounds like an interesting connection and a linking theme. Now, with this, it may seem like it's coming from the perspective of someone looking outside from inside the top of the tower, but it's actually more likely about being in an aircraft of sorts, which seems more fitting, I suppose, since Mike had gotten a pilot's license at the time. Then there's that simple yet distinct, recognizable chorus. Can we get much higher? Could we get much lighter? Navigator to heaven. Well, I can certainly tell you that John could definitely get higher in pitch of his voice, maybe. And of course, many of you would probably recognize this bit for being sampled by Kanye West or Ye or Yee or whatever he wants to call himself now for his song Dark Fantasy, which itself became part of a One Piece meme quite recently. So yeah, the internet will make a meme out of practically anything if possible, no matter how obscure it may be. But hey, as long as it gets them into this song, I'm good. In High Place is one of my personal favourites of Mike Oldfield's tracks, and possibly among one of his more underrated singles. What else can I say but the One Piece? The One Piece is real! Then we have Foreign Affair, a simple yet evocative track with vocals also done by Maggie Riley. The use of Roland and Fairlight CMI synthesizers really bring out this quirky and whimsical yet moody feeling, complemented by Maggie's light voice and streamingly conscious lyrics. For an affair, take a trip in the air to a tropical beach, an island to reach. However, that trip is going to cost £300 per person. A new territory for an intimate story, a lagoon by la mer. Boy, this early pitch for the shape of water is really weird. A hush in the air you can feel anywhere, in the cool twilight on a tropical night. Or that could be someone ordering to keep quiet and that they're trying to sleep. Either way, a hush in the air you can feel. There's not a whole lot to say about this one. While it may not be as renowned or memorable as Moonlight Shadow or In High Places, it's still a pretty tropical song. It's like the kind of music you hear in an 80s espionage thriller film, setting like a Mediterranean country. So, if you're out near a beach, watching as the sun itself is setting down, try playing this song and see if it fits the mood for you. After that is Taurus 3. Contrasting with Taurus 1 from QE2 and Taurus 2 from 5 Miles Out, this is a very short piece, if not the shortest on this album, barely at about 2.5 minutes, if even that. And as opposed to the complex instrumentations of the first two, this one basically has, at best, a bright and vibrant Spanish guitar and some simple yet energized drums. It reminds me a bit of, say, Big Love by Fleetwood Mac. The already fast-paced melody gets real good and charged up near the midpoint, like a flamenco dance-off turned up to 11. And then it gets repeated all over again before it actually ends on a sudden note. I'd be almost tempted to say ole by the end of it. But yeah, trying to compare this to the previous tour songs would prove hard and kind of and unfair, since it's like comparing apples, oranges, and pears. I'm curious enough though to wonder if there could be like a compilation of just these three Taurus tracks. And I also kind of wonder what a Taurus 4 would have been like. Would it be an extended piece like the first? Would it take up an entire side like the second? Or would it just be short and fast like the third? Or would it be something else entirely? Who knows? But as is, this one is short, sweet, and succulently simple. And so, our album ends with another favourite Mike Oldfield song of mine, Shadow on the Wall. And boy howdy, is this the right choice to go out on. A groovy, hard-rocking tune with guest vocals by Roger Chapman from the band Family. And he sings really good here. Reminds me a bit of Robert Plant and other classic hard rock singers. The way he repeats the title along with the guitars and Simon Phillips' drums just embodies the sense of paranoia that the overall song seems to evoke. Not to mention the two very few verses in which Roger says to treat him like a prisoner, a fool and a loser, like he's evil, like a criminal, and to do all kinds of things to him. Use him as a tool, face him till he's hungry, freeze him till he's cold, grab him till he's old, etc. As if he's kept prisoner in a cell, awaiting and anticipating whatever treatment or punishment may come his way. Or maybe even he's some kind of masochist who takes in such sort of twisted pleasure from all this. It does kind of sound like the ramblings of a mental patient or a crook behind bars. And then there's that exhilarating guitar solo, probably one of his best in my opinion. Mike Oldfield is always good with those guitars, and with those guitar solos. If I were to have one problem with this song, is that it's a bit short. I know the other tracks are generally short too, but this one was really starting to get good, especially since it's the ending song. There is of course an extended version of this song, which I think you can find on like YouTube somewhere. But anyways, Shadow on the Wall is still a good enough closer for this record. And this record is pretty good. Probably one of Mike Oldfield's best and most memorable albums even. Mostly because of how distinct and memorable each of the songs are, and how unique and distinct they are from each other, which I think it helps. The title song being one of his classic sidelong compositions, Moonlight Shadow being a classic 80s gem, and In High Places and Shadow on the Wall are among my favourites, of course. Proving well that he's just as capable of making good short tunes as much as long ones. And like with its predecessor 5 Miles Out, they managed to balance out quite well. So yeah, if you want to listen to some of his other albums besides Tubular Bells, I definitely recommend checking out this one among them. You'll be carried away by a Moonlight Shadow. But for those who have been listening to this album before, what do you think? Is this one of his best records in your opinion? Is it on par with Tubular Bells? And what may be your favourite Mike Oldfield album? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And that's pretty much it for Mike Oldfield albums for the time being. One of the reasons I did this was because of not only these two albums reaching special anniversaries this month, but also because of recently revealed news of Mike Oldfield's retirement, which he apparently had started about 5 years ago. And the last thing he did and made was an introduction for a scrapped 4th Tubular Bells album, which I'm sure would have been made for this time in the 50th anniversary. But from what I heard, that introduction track is going to be included in a new special re-release of the original classic Tubular Bells. And honestly, it's a bit of a shame, since it would have been such a fitting way to go out with, to bookend his entire musical discography. He began with Tubular Bells and would have ended with Tubular Bells 50 years later, but instead he ended with a sequel to Omadorn, which I hear is good, and I'll probably cover that sometime later. But still, Mike Oldfield had left behind a legacy of brilliant and diverse music, and I hope to review more of his stuff in the future. Next time, though, we go into another album from 1983, and possibly another well-known one of that, by the Starman and the Goblin King himself.